doing this every Thursday night or every other Thursday night since we went into shelter in place, which was 6 months ago this week. Hard to imagine. Here we all are together. Well, it is a pleasure bringing you updates about the state of health in Oakland, but also other things that you need to know about. And I don't know about you, but election season is on my mind, especially access to that democratic right of voting. And how honored are we to have with us tonight the Secretary of State for the state of California, Alex Padilla. But before we get into our special topic tonight, just a quick update on things you should know that have been happening in Oakland. If you can give me the slides, Messiah. I think you all might recall, while we wait for those slides to come up, that the governor announced a new system for designating health risk in different counties throughout California. Purple, while a favorite color of many of us, is not good. It is actually the most hazardous or widespread state of COVID. And Alameda County is still in the purple. San Francisco just this week got moved into red. But we are in good company. You see that the terms for staying in purple or widespread and substantial are there, but the important thing to know is that you have to maintain that status for 3 consecutive weeks. Next slide. What you'll see is that Alameda County actually has been in red status with only 6 new positive cases per day per 100,000 residents, and a case rate of 5.6, a positivity rate of 3.4. Now that is low enough to put us in the red zone, but we have to be there for 2 more weeks in order to get that upgraded status. Updates come every Tuesday, so you can go to California Blueprint Data Chart to check our status. Next slide. Also, we are continuing to do fabulous pop-up free testing efforts. These do not require an appointment, although if you do want to pre-register, you can at unitedinhealthoakland.org. But this Friday, coming Friday, BOSS is doing an all-day walk-up testing at 9006 MacArthur Boulevard. Again, focus for East Oakland, although no one will be turned away. Saturday, September 19th, Center of Hope Community Church at 84th and MacArthur, walk-up or drive-through testing. And then Saturday and Sunday, we are having all day at La Clínica de la Raza in their parking lot, both walk-up and drive-through testing at 35th and East 12th Street. Again, a focus on Fruitvale residents, Spanish spoken, but no one will be turned away. Remember, this is free, no insurance is required, no questions about immigration status are ever asked. This is confidential and safe and important for your health, your family's health, and our whole community's health. And thank you to Umoja Health Collaborative, which has really been doing some fantastic community building work to make sure that everyone, particularly in East Oakland, is getting access to testing as well as resources. And when you go to these pop-up sites, lots of resources. You can find out where to get food, more about Oakland Undivided, where you can get computers and other things for your distance learners. Lots of great resources. So please check out any of these community events, the 18th, the 19th, and the 26th and 27th. Next slide. All right, we're excited for you to make a plan to vote, and I'm sure Secretary Padilla will talk about this to make sure you are signed up to vote, or you need to update your information or your address. Go to registertovote.ca.gov. To check your status, you can go to voterstatus.sos.ca.gov. And then finally, track to make sure your ballot has been counted. at where'smyballot.sos.ca.gov. I'm sure we'll hear more about these important services so everyone can feel confident that they can vote and that their vote is counted. Next slide. We want to make sure you know that some polling stations will not be open this year due to COVID-19, but you can check which polling stations in Oakland will be accessible on voting day by going to acvote.org. That stands for Alameda County, acvote.org. And next slide. I know a lot of people are nervous about getting their ballots through the mail counted in time. There will be special vote by mail drop boxes throughout the city of Oakland. Look at all those locations. Again, go to acvote.org for a full list and a map of mailbox drop locations. Next slide. Some great resources, and we can also add these to the chat. Again, acvote.org is for Oaklanders or anyone who lives in Alameda County to find out everything you need to know about this local election. Secretary Padilla can talk about his own website with lots of great information for Californians. The League of Women Voters of Oakland is such a trusted resource, not only about voting, but also about a lot of the ballot measures, what the pros and cons are. And that is mylwv.org/California/Oakland. Congratulations, League, on celebrating your 100th birthday this year. Some places that people can volunteer if they want to get involved in encouraging people to vote outside of this area and throughout the United States. And I'm excited we're going to hear from the national NAACP about their efforts. But just whenweallvote.org is an organization founded by Valerie Jarrett. Michelle Obama is another leader in it. It is nonpartisan. Whenweallvote.org is a great organization to help other people throughout the country get registered and turn out on Election Day. And then recognizing that many Oaklanders are Democrats, I do want to warn that this is a partisan resource, but swingleft.org has ways that Democrats can get involved in registering and getting people out to the polls in critical states throughout the country. If you want to get involved in voter turnout outside of Oakland in some places that particularly with the presidential election are going to really matter, swingleft.org is also has a lot of great opportunities, including letter writing, which is a very beautiful personal way for us to inspire democratic action through our just our friends and neighbors. Next slide. In news this week, one exciting announcement is Oakland introduced a resolution. I am a co-sponsor of it, along with our city attorney, Barbara Parker, and council members Kaplan and Tao. But we are now requiring that all resolutions, policies, and communications use gender inclusive and gender neutral language. This is an important way for us to create a sense of belonging for all people in Oakland who we cherish and celebrate. And so we hope that you too will start adopting gender neutral language, but this is something that your city is doing to ensure that everyone feels included. Next slide. Also last week, Mayor Garcia of Long Beach and I announced the formation of Mayors for Medicare for All. Healthcare is a human right, and we have set an ambitious goal of recruiting 100 mayors from throughout these United States to say that it is time for Medicare for all. If there is one lesson we have learned through this health tragedy of COVID, and just on a personal note, Mayor Garcia lost both of his parents to COVID not so long ago. It is time for universal health care coverage. We hope that mayors who represent communities, we are down on the ground with our communities, can tell the stories and send a strong message to the new Congress that now is the time for universal health coverage. Medicare has been a successful program for many, many years. It is time to bring it to everyone. Learn more at mayorsformedicare.com. Next slide. 13 days left. You only have 13 days to respond to the 2020 census. Please start every Zoom you have by asking everyone on the line, have you completed your census? For each person, and that includes babies, roommates, your grandma, anybody who is in your household. And remember, this is safe and secure. Our beloved undocumented residents can safely complete the census. For each person counted, that is $10,000 over the next 10 years in vital services for the city of Oakland. We cannot afford for anyone to be left out. Just 13 days left to go to my2020census.gov and be sure that you and everyone you know gets counted. Next slide. All right, that concludes my update. Please, as we talk tonight and we hear from our esteemed guests, please send your comments, your questions through Thought Exchange. You can click on the link or scan the QR code, or if you are calling in from a phone, then you can text this number, 72855. Text that number to the number 136-618-732. We'll show this slide again later in the conversation, but now it is my great pleasure to introduce our special guests. So first of all, we are going to have the esteemed Secretary of State, Alex Padilla. I know that the Honorable Mr. Padilla was originally a city council member in the great city of Los Angeles. He's going to talk about the incredible job he is doing to ensure that everyone has access to their democratic right of voting. What is going to be new this year? How voting is changing because of the pandemic, but how you can be sure that you will be counted. Thank you, Mr. Padilla, for joining us today. Also, we are going to, and please just wave, we are also going to hear from Mirandon A. Henry. The NAACP National Board of Directors member will be giving us a presentation on how residents can volunteer locally or support voting rights efforts nationally. I want to commend the NAACP for being just tireless champions of fighting against voter suppression, ensuring that not just Black voters, but all voters get their democratic right to be heard. So thank you. These are fabulous presenters we have tonight. And let's kick it off with Secretary of State, Alex Padilla.
Well, thank you, Mayor Schaaf, and good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in for this important and obviously very timely conversation. Mayor Schaaf, you're a rock star. I know you're doing a great job, not just in Oakland, but beyond. Mayor Garcia is a friend too, so our heart goes out to him for what he's been through lately. And I thank you, before we get to voting, thank you for plugging the census, because as you know, there's now less than 2 weeks left for us to respond to the census. Statewide, California is a little bit above the national average in response rate to date, but more than 30% of California households have not responded to the census yet, and we risk losing a lot of both political clout and federal funding for our communities on the table. So please, if you haven't done it already, you saw the link, my2020census.gov, and have every friend, every family member, every neighbor make sure they do the same. But appreciate a few minutes of your time this evening to give just a quick overview of what people should expect for this November's election. You know, there's always the message that it's important to register, important to vote, and all the reasons why we should vote in every election, because you care about education or healthcare or climate change or safety in our communities. Boy, if the COVID-19 pandemic and the lack of national leadership on that, and of course the summer that we've had, the most recent social justice movement in America, if 2020 hasn't given you a reason to vote, I don't know what it's going to take. But the good news is I think Californians are responding. We had record registration going into the March primary. We had record turnout, and now registration continues to go up. We just passed the 21 million mark for registered voters in California. So I actually feel very good about a strong turnout in November, but it's important that voters know their options. And you heard some of that during Mayor Schaaf's presentation already. Our recommendation is to make a plan, right? You're going to have options on how to vote, and I'll go through them in a little bit more detail. But whether you vote by mail or vote in person, make a plan for how you're going to vote. Know the timing of when you can vote, because we're going to encourage people to vote early if at all possible. But most importantly, make sure you're registered and you vote. I'm going to ask Tamara from my office to put vote.ca.gov in the chat box. It's our one-stop shop for all the elections and voting related tools and information you're going to need. Here's how the November election is going to look. Every active registered voter in the state of California is going to be sent a vote by mail ballot no less than 29 days before the election, right? Because of COVID and everything else going on, it's probably going to be your safest option for casting your ballot. Do it by mail. So you'll get your vote by mail ballot in the first week of October, and you'll have multiple options for how to return your ballot. You can mail it back. I still think the Postal Service is a reliable way to go, and I'll shed some more light on how we're working with them. And California is so committed to making it easy, you don't even need stamps anymore. Return postage is prepaid. If you choose, you can also return your ballot to any ballot drop box in the county convenient to you. And you saw a map earlier of all the locations in Alameda County where you can deliver your ballot in person. Or if you choose, you can always drop it off in person at any in-person voting location once in-person voting opens up. Now, we've been working pretty closely with the county to identify as many in-person voting locations, and they're going to be open not just on Tuesday, November 3rd, they're going to be open for at least 4 days of voting. So starting on Saturday, October 31st, you can vote on Saturday, you can vote on Sunday, you can vote on Monday, you can even vote on Tuesday, November 3rd if you put it off to the last minute. And that's if you didn't vote by mail to begin with. So as you can see, plenty of options. But let me give you a little bit more information on each of those options. For in-person voting, just like we can't go to the grocery store the same way anymore, if you choose to vote in person, or if you need to vote in person, bring your mask. We're going to have all the public health guidelines incorporated into the in-person voting experience. So expect signage for physical distancing, gloves, masks, hand sanitizer, all the things that we need to do to keep both voters and election workers safe. And I'm going to come back and talk about election workers in a minute. But the vote by mail options, people have been asking me, I'm hearing that it may not be secure. How do I know? It is. Vote by mail is nothing new in California. We've been doing it for decades. It is convenient, it is secure, and probably your safest option to vote this November. But just as an added measure, note a couple of dates. Number one, like I mentioned a minute ago, the county will mail ballots out no less than 29 days before the election. That's more than 4 weeks. So even if there were delays in the Postal Service, you're going to get your ballot in plenty of time before the election. When you return it, if you choose to return it by mail, California law says as long as your ballot is postmarked on or before Election Day, it can arrive after the Election Day by 3 days even and still be counted. We are extending that deadline for this November, just in case there are the delays that people are worried about in the Postal Service. So as long as your ballot is postmarked on or before Election Day, it can arrive up to 17 days after, and it will still be counted. But you've got to mail it back on a timely basis, and of course, the sooner, the better. And just for an added layer of transparency and confidence, we just expanded our ballot tracking tool statewide. So any voter in the state of California can sign up. Go to vote.ca.gov and sign up for Where's My Ballot? And you can receive alerts by either email or text message or phone call on the status of your ballot through that delivery process. So you'll know when the county sends it out to you, and you can start checking your mailbox. When you mail it back, you'll get that confirmation that it's in the process. And imagine getting a message that confirming your ballot was received, right? Great for peace of mind. We always wonder, we always assume it's there, but you'll get a message confirming that you received the ballot and when the ballot is counted. So I think that's going to be great for peace of mind for voters, but frankly, it's going to be a helpful tool for us as well, because we'll be able to monitor that traffic of ballots through the mail. And if there's any delays, any bottlenecks, we'll be able to work with the Postal Service to make sure that ballots keep moving. So that's sort of the big overview. Vote by mail if you can, vote in person if you must, vote early if at all possible, but make sure you vote. In preparation for voting, if you haven't registered to vote, come on, people. You have plenty of options. You can do the paper form. You can do it online. If you haven't done it at DMV, and if you miss all the deadlines, you can still show up in person and do same-day registration. But if you want to do it online, go to vote.ca.gov and register to vote today. If you're already registered, it's always a good idea to verify your registration status. Right? Sometimes it's been a while, and if you move, you change your address because you want your driver's license with your current address, but you forget about me. You forget about the elections office to make sure that they have your current address. So go to vote.ca.gov and go to voter status and make sure your voter information is up to date. If you need to update it, go back to the voter registration tool and you can do it there. Those are a couple of things to do in preparation along with signing up for Where's My Ballot. And last but not least, because I know I'm taking up a lot of time here and I want to get to your questions, for the in-person options, I mentioned we want to make sure that they're as available as possible for the people who need it. So we've been trying to get creative, right? There's not going to be any more voting in a neighbor's garage or in a retirement home. That doesn't make any more sense under COVID. So working with Alameda County, we've been looking for new smarter locations, safer locations, and larger locations so we can accommodate that physical distancing. So be on the lookout for different polling places than you may have been used to in the past. And we'll be announcing hopefully some exciting locations real soon. Even if we had all the locations we could ask for, they're not that helpful to us if we don't have the volunteers to staff them. And if you think about the people who have helped us administer elections in the past, a lot of senior citizens, a lot of retired folks, that frankly, those are the ones that Dr. Fauci is saying, stay home, protect yourself. And so Alameda County, the whole state of California, frankly, is in need of new poll workers. And so I wanted to make the pitch tonight. If anybody here or anybody you know is interested and healthy and able and willing to serve as a poll worker, we need your help. So guess what? You can go to vote.ca.gov, scroll down to poll worker, and enter your name and your contact information. And we'll make sure the county office reaches out to you, because poll workers get three things. They get the proper training, right? You got to know what you're doing when you're helping us with the elections. You get all the PPE that's necessary. Remember, we want to keep both voters and election workers safe. And you'll get compensation, right? You actually do get paid for your service as a poll worker. The stipend varies a little bit by county, but it's usually somewhere around $100 a day. There's usually a bonus if you're bilingual. So if you're bilingual, we especially need your help. So wanted to make that pitch for everybody here tonight. It's important to register. It's important to vote. And if you want to do one more step in civic duty, consider being a poll worker. Young people can do it too, by the way. 16 and 17-year-olds can still sign up with the permission of their parents and the permission of their school. They too can be a poll worker and get paid. So thank you for having me. Let's get to your questions.
Great. Thank you so much, Secretary Padilla. I'm bummed. I have a 15-year-old, but I guess he'll have to wait till the next election to help out. So I got some questions, 6 questions for you ahead of time. One of them, at least, I know you've already answered, which was, can we still register to vote? I heard you say you can actually register on election day. How does somebody do that?
Yes. So, we recently incorporated same-day registration in California. So if you missed the deadline to register or even to update your registration, you can show up in person. And basically what you do is you register to vote and you're given a ballot. We won't count the ballot until we process the registration. Right? We need to make sure the registration goes through proper first, and then your ballot is counted a little after the fact. So we don't recommend it. We like it when people register in advance. But if you missed that deadline for some reason, we don't want you to lose your right to vote. because of that deadline. So we'll do the extra work if we have to.
That is so great. That is not how it always was. So
No.
a big expansion to access. Here's a good question, and I think there are a couple ballot measures that are relevant to this as well. What steps are being taken to get the younger generation to vote? It is important because they are our future, and voting helps to bring change.
Oh my gosh, young people have been a big priority of mine as Secretary of State. One of the things I love about this job during normal circumstances is traveling the state, visiting communities, visiting high schools especially, to talk about the importance of registering and the importance of voting when you turn 18. So we actually, inspired by a lot of the student and student leaders statewide, put together a high school toolkit. So you go to the Secretary of State's website, and you can find it on our elections page. We have toolkits for young people who want to not just register to vote or pre-register to vote or serve as poll workers, but if you want to organize a voter registration drive on your campus or in your community, we give you all the materials to be able to do things like that. As I mentioned, it's not just voter registration when you turn 18. California is one of the few states that allows 16 and 17-year-olds to pre-register to vote. So you go to the same voter registration website or paper form, and you can go ahead and fill it out once you're 16 or 17 and then not worry about it anymore. When you're 18 years old, we activate your voter registration and you're set to vote in every single election. And I already mentioned the ability for young people to work as poll workers, just another opportunity to be a formal part of the process. And I just got to say, it may not be specific elections related, but I've just been so inspired this last summer. A lot of the protests and demonstrations demanding the end to systemic racism in America and more equality of opportunity have been led by young people. So Mayor Schaaf, I know that when you and I are retired from political life, we're going to be in some great hands.
That is for sure. And I also want to thank, I had at least 35 young people who were some of my best campaign volunteers who weren't old enough to vote themselves, but inspired other people to vote. You should also know that on Oakland's ballot will be Measure QQ. Measure QQ will give high school students the right to vote in school board elections. And then I believe there's another statewide proposition that would allow 17-year-olds to vote in the primaries if they're going to be 18 in time for the general election. So both a local and a statewide ballot initiative that would expand voter rights to younger people.
Yes, the state measure, I'll sum it up quickly, is Proposition 18, which would allow young people, if you're going to be 18 years old and eligible to vote in the general election, this would give you the ability to vote in the primary election, regardless of what month your birthday is. Right? Currently, if you're not 18 by the primary, you can't vote. If you are 18, of course you can. And so this would make just the age by the general election the marker. I'd like to say California is the first state in the nation to do this, but we're not. There's, I think, 19 states plus the District of Columbia that already do this. So it's time that we catch up.
Great. Now, here's two questions that I think you addressed, but just quickly refresh our memory. How many weeks before the election do we need to send our ballot by mail to make sure it's counted by Election Day? The answer is kind of 0. And then also, how do we know when our ballots have been counted?
Right. So, yes, in other states where maybe the mail is a little slower or they have different deadlines by which the ballot has to be back to the county, that's more of an important question. So, again, in California, as long as it's postmarked on or before Election Day, it can arrive up to 17 days after the election and still be counted in this election. But of course, we recommend earlier rather than later. And if you want to make sure it's been counted, again, we have this great new tool, Where's My Ballot? Go to Where's My Ballot and sign up, and you'll get those automatic alerts. And you pick text message, email, phone call, whatever you prefer with those confirmation messages. That's never happened before. So with all the chatter about is vote by mail reliable or how do I know, we're proving that it works here in California.
Great. A couple more questions. Why are there fewer polling places? People shouldn't have to travel so far to vote. And do I have to vote by mail? Can I vote in person?
Yeah. So no, it's a great question, and it's been a tough challenge for us. You know, if it was up to us, we'd have tons of voting locations, but COVID has had an impact on elections. I mentioned earlier the need for newer, smarter voting locations, which have been a little bit tougher to come by because there's a lot of venues, both public and private, that are a little bit more reluctant to have a bunch of people come through and vote during the pandemic. And so we have allowed counties to open fewer locations, but in exchange for more days. And that's a big deal, right? It's not going to be long lines on Tuesday, November 3rd. Hopefully we get a good amount of people voting on Saturday or Sunday or Monday or Tuesday if you put it off to the last day. It's not an all vote by mail only election. If you want to vote in person, you can. But voting in person is also not your only option. If you're willing and able, we strongly encourage vote by mail. Keep yourself, your family, and your community safe.
Great. Well, Secretary, we've gotten a few live questions through Thought Exchange and on our different social media channels. Here's one. How do we know that secrecy of ballot is maintained? And how can I switch from mail to in-person voting?
Okay, so I'll take the second part first. How do you switch from mail to in-person voting? Look, we made the decision. Every active registered voter is going to receive their ballot in the mail automatically. So again, you can choose. You want to fill it out at home, mail it back, you can do that. You want to fill it out at home and walk it in, drop it off, you can do that. If you want to bring it with you and vote in person anyway, you can do that. Or even if you lose it, make a mistake, we hope you've taken a little good care of it, but you can still handle your voting in person if that is your preference. So we're not making you choose between those two. In terms of your privacy, oh my gosh, that is sacrosanct in the United States of America. We know who votes. We can even know who votes by mail versus who votes in person, but we don't know who voted for who. All right, how you vote, your ballot is private and secret. And so that's maintained both in the polling place and if you vote by mail, your ballot's your ballot. This is important to remember. So you fill out your ballot and you put it in the initial envelope. The envelope itself, you do have to sign. We want to make sure we mark who has voted. We verify your signature as part of our security measures. But once the county confirms, okay, this voter is legit, the ballot gets opened, the ballot's removed and separated from the envelope. So once the ballot is counted, we don't know who voted for who. We just know who voted. So we do honor and protect your privacy.
Great. That is so reassuring. I've got two more questions that came in through social media before we go over to our other esteemed guest, Mr. Henry. This one is from Daniel on Facebook. How are we fighting against misinformation regarding voting in California?
Oh, and that's a great question. I appreciate it, because if there's one thing that keeps me up at night, if there's one thing that causes me stress, it's the threat of misinformation and disinformation. And sadly, it's no longer from foreign adversaries trying to cause confusion through social media. We're hearing it from the highest levels of our government, if you know what I mean. And so the first thing that we can do is remind people, if you have questions or need information about elections, about voting, go to the official source, right? You can contact the Alameda County Elections Office, either by phone or online, or come to the Secretary of State's office, vote.ca.gov. Go to the official sources for official information. My office has developed some tools, not just human eyeballs on social media, but monitoring technology to try to identify misleading or erroneous information. And we do work with the social media companies to try to get it taken down because the last thing we want in California is voter suppression. And we actually ask you to be involved. If you see something suspicious on social media or anywhere online, you can report it to us. Go to vote.ca.gov, scroll down to election cybersecurity, and you can see the mechanism with which you can report to us some of those posts that you're wondering about, and we'll check it out. And if it's wrong, misleading, and dangerous, then we'll work with the social media companies to address that. So we are mindful of it, and thank you for asking that question.
Great. And this is our last question. It came live from Daniel on Facebook. Daniel's having a Zoom on September 30th, and he wants to know how he can get a state representative on his call. What do you have to say to Jesse?
All right. Well, send us the time, and the information and see if I or somebody from my office can join, or maybe we'll even try to connect you with your local legislator so you can ask questions about elections and a whole lot of other issues.
Yeah, absolutely. I know elected officials love giving their opinions, myself included, on the different, particularly ballot initiatives. Also, the League of Women Voters here in Oakland has a fabulous speakers bureau called Pros and Cons. It's very neutral. You won't even be able to tell how that speaker is going to be voting, him or herself, but they do lay out the pros and cons of all the ballot measures that will be on your ballot. A great resource. Secretary Padilla, thank you so much. I know that you have to go to other duties, that you're leaving a staff member if other questions come up. But thank you so much for your excellent service to California and all the amazing things you've done to make voting so much more accessible and safe.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and I can't wait once this pandemic is over to come back to Oakland in person.
Yeah, well, we will welcome you with open arms, but maybe a mask on. All right. Next up, I am so thrilled. I don't think any organization has done more to fight against voter suppression and to really deliver the promise of democracy than the NAACP. And joining us here tonight is a member of their national board of directors, and that is Mirandon A. Henry. Mr. Henry, thank you so much for sharing with our viewers tonight how they can get involved, encourage more people to vote, help turn out the vote, both locally and across the country. Mr. Henry.
Thank you, Mayor Schaaf, for your leadership and for this opportunity. And thanks to Secretary Padilla for his leadership as well. I was really excited to see on an article last week about the voter rate increasing in California. So that was exciting. But overall, I'm just glad to be here. And just to talk about voting rights, this is one of my favorite topics to talk about, because the conversations are not only exciting, but it can also be sad too if you're talking to, voters who have voted in the past, but they aren't, encouraged to do it anymore simply because of the condition that they live in. So overall, I'm excited to be here. And to Messiah, we go to the first slide. And so one of the things at the NAACP that we're doing on the national level is we're making sure that we have our general election priorities. So within the NAACP, Secretary Padilla have already touched on it. It's about misinformation. We know that misinformation specifically is normally goes into Black communities, especially on social media, specifically Facebook and Instagram. And with the national, we're making sure that we do voter education. So we've done virtual webinars and town halls with U.S. senators, representatives, and Black, and trying to get the vote out and also encouraging people to vote. And again, I think that me being somebody from California, it's easy to convince me to vote. But if you're talking to somebody in the swing state that lives in certain conditions, we have to push much harder with webinar house, and also with also rabbi that we just recently started doing this week in swings. We're also advocating for voter protection, so that's for same-day registration and also transparency to the public, and also most importantly, voter empowerment. Secretary Padilla has already touched on it about poll workers. We're also encouraging voters, Black voters specifically, if they have the time to be a poll worker this year, we're definitely considering that simply because you do get trained and you also get paid. And not only that, with the next slide, I'm talking about a campaign that we just launched. And again, this is all for the national, and I know that people are probably doing registration in their local communities in Oakland or in the Bay Area, but we just launched Black Voices Change Lives. And with this one, it's going to activate infrequent Black voters in critical battleground states. And so that's specifically the 12 different states. And we saw that the Black voting increased by 5% over 2016. We want to increase it by 5%. And we saw that the voter turnout was at a historic 12, but in 2016 it fell. So we want to make sure that with all 12 of these states that we're able to talk to Black voters who have voted in the past, and just to encourage them why their voice matters for this election. And with all 12 of these states, they all go hand in hand because it's going to determine what happens in November. So whether or not, we get a new person in the White House, or you may get like a new PA or a new council person, we chose these battleground states. So if you are interested, we are encouraging, individuals who are voters to volunteer with us. You can call or text people or send postcards just to encourage people to get their power, get their voices to the polls in November, or encourage them to by mail. So I know in California we automatically get our ballots automatically, but in most states, including southern states, a lot of times have an excuse that actually vote and voter suppression. So we're encouraging everybody to visit BlackVoicesChangeLives.org. And the time commitment is based on your availability. And we have an online launch event September 27th to the 28th, where you will get hands-on training on how to mobilize Black voters in battleground states and how to encourage them to vote. And with the next slide, just want to talk about just the resources. So if you look in the more info in the comment section, you would definitely see resources on how to become a poll worker, how to volunteer with our organization, and also how to become a member of your local branch. So if you are in Oakland, you can go to NAACP.org/membership and visit the website. Black Voices Change, you will see all you have to do is put your first and last name and so your zip code and email. And that's all we ask for. And again, this is to talk to Black voters in battleground states, to get them to vote in November and to see, what issues they have in their communities and how we can help them to get to the polls, whether they need their rights to the poll, whether, they need help filling out the ballot. That's what we're trying to do on the national level. And with the next slide, I definitely want to touch on, if you are in the city of Oakland, they've been running, and just the other day, they had their first candidate forum for city council and school board. And so the next candidate forum that they're having is on Monday, September the 21st from 5 to 8 p.m. on Zoom. And on next week, they're going to be a candidate forum for Oakland City Council and school board districts 5 and 7. And so if you live in District 5 or 7, I encourage you to attend the candidate forum, so that way you know what's going on in your community in that district specifically. And once again, that next Monday, September 21st, and I'm really excited about it. We had a huge turnout on this past Monday. So again, if you live in District 5 or 7 from 5 to 8 p.m., I encourage you to attend. And the second thing that we're doing, we're definitely gearing with the young people. Oakland, they're doing a partnership with McClymonds High School. The goal is to empower youth to engage in civic activism to increase voter registration. And the next thing is just doing a monthly civic engagement mentoring sessions to high schoolers at McClymonds High School, whether we are encouraging them to get registered to vote, or we're also letting them participate in actually planning some of the candidate forums that we do. We understand when it comes to questions that we ask. We're definitely gearing all questions on what is your Black agenda, especially to the school board members. So we're really excited about that. And we're also partnering with Reclaim Our Vote Process, and they are sending postcards to Black voters and non-voters in the South, reminding them to get registered to vote. And so far, the Oakland branch has sent over 2,000 postcards to Black and Browners, encouraging them to get registered to vote and letting them know what's at stake in November. And with the next slide, it's just resources that if you need any resources for the Oakland branch, if you live in Oakland, I encourage you to reach out to them. And in the comment section, you will see all those resources on with the next slide. So again, September 21st, they have it there, District 5 and 7, and that's going to be on Zoom. And again, if you become a member of the Oakland branch, it's only $30 a year. And again, it's different opportunities for young people and also adults who are trying to get involved on a local level, whether that's justice, education, or civic engagement. So I definitely encourage you, if you are trying to get involved locally, I encourage you to reach out to the Oakland branch of the NAACP just see how you can get involved and how to get your friends and family involved. For the next slide, the last one, again, it's just encouraging you guys for the information for next week's candidate forum. And again, I encourage you guys to attend if you live in District 5 or 7. And that's the end of my presentation. But, one thing that I always remind people after I have a conversation about civic engagement, especially civic engagement around Black voters, is to always talk about, at least once or twice a month, I'm always ask people to at least support 1 to 2 Black businesses, especially in this time of uncertainty. It's very important that we support businesses from Black and brown people, making sure that they have access to, buildings and businesses, especially in the city of Oakland. So, yeah, once again, please talk to your friends and family, at least 5 of them. Ask if they're registered to vote, and if you are interested in becoming a volunteer for the national on the national level, I encourage you. It's going to be an exciting opportunity just to talk to people that you have never met before. You can call them and just check up on them to see if they are excited about November. So thank you so much, Mayor Schaaf, for this opportunity. And if there's any questions, just let me know. Thank you.
Mr. Henry, thank you so much. And thank you for reminding people that there are local elections going on. Now, while I chat a little bit, and I got some advanced questions that don't have to do with voting that I can answer while we wait for questions to come in, can you please put up the information about Thought Exchange one more time? We want anyone who's watching this live to send questions in about local engagement, the NAACP's efforts, both locally and nationally. Please send anything, and you can ask me anything as your mayor. So please go to Thought Exchange or just shoot your question on social media, and one of our fabulous interns or staff will text it to me while I sit here in my Zoom world. Just quickly, I really want to underscore what Mr. Henry pointed out, which is that I know we're all excited about the presidential election. I know I'm excited about the vice presidential election because we've got an Oakland girl on the ballot, Kamala Harris. But there are a lot of local races. We have 5 city council races. 5. We have the city attorney. We have 4 of our school board seats, and none of the incumbents are running for re-election. We have to choose all new school board members in this election for those 4 seats. So a lot going on at the local level. And if you study your statewide ballot initiatives, you will see that equity is on the ballot in California this year. In particular, I know a lot of people are excited about Proposition 16, which would revoke Proposition 209 that prohibited race-based contracting and other race-based considerations in governmental actions. Many of us believe that if we are going to end institutionalized racism in government, we have to talk about race. So those are just some of the race equity issues on the ballot in California this year. Please, these forums are fabulous places to get to know the candidates. And in some ways, thanks to the pandemic, you don't even have to drive to an auditorium. You can just Zoom on in. While we wait for the live questions to come in for Mr. Henry or for Secretary Padilla's representative, I do want to respond to some advanced questions I got, mostly about policing, interestingly. I got one question: how can Oakland redirect OPD budget while still keeping the community safe? Oakland has the highest crime per police ratio in the U.S. and can't even enforce the new parking restrictions at Lake Merritt to keep people safe in a pandemic. Another question I got was, can OPD intervene earlier, become the face of civil order and safety instead of force and violence, after the fact violence? OPD response should result in community referral. Oakland, a city of color that wants law enforcement to succeed, needs funding at all laws. And then finally, a question while being respectful of all its response time on calls, so especially calls regarding violence or guns in use, causing lack of confidence and disregard for OPD and laws. So I will answer those as a group. I am so excited and very proud that Oakland just launched last night the Reimagining Public Safety Task Force. This is an extensive community involvement process to really set a course about redefining public safety, particularly in this moment of cries for racial justice, for police accountability, and to defund the police. And so these conversations are being had by community leaders who will be developing over the next 6 months a set of recommendations, particularly for budget considerations. All of these ideas and questions that you just heard raised are ones that are on the table as we seek to reimagine public safety. I will say one thing that I'm very excited about, and also Oakland should be proud of, is more than a year ago, we started the process of adding a non-police response to 911 calls. We're calling it macro. And these would be community-based medics, crisis intervention specialists, medical health specialists that would provide a non-armed and trauma-informed care-based response to appropriate calls. This potentially would not only create a much better sense of safety in Oakland, but eventually could help with response times, which one of the questioners asked about, as well as really a more holistic approach to safety. The question about resources, since we're talking about elections, one other thing on your ballot this year is Proposition 15. While I'm not going to advocate for you to vote a certain way, I can tell you why I have endorsed Proposition 15. Proposition 15 would adjust the tax rate for properties owned by large corporations. It exempts small businesses, it exempts residential properties, and that includes rental properties or landlords, and it has special protections for large corporate owners who rent primarily to small businesses. It is intended to protect our small businesses. But if this measure passes and creates a second tax roll, the resources that local governments and our public school system will increase tremendously over the next few years, and certainly give us many more options to both improve and help reform policing, as well as to add the kind of restorative services, the more holistic care, and the investment in preventing the causes of crime to begin with. And we all know that starts with jobs, with housing security, economic security, and a great public education system. The last question I got while we're waiting for thought exchange questions to come up is to asking that all candidates refuse and return campaign contributions from police and police unions. I can tell you that this is now a common question that is asked to candidates, and I certainly have not yet heard of a candidate who has not been willing to take that pledge. Certainly, it's important that everyone knows where contributions are coming from. Oakland has more transparency around that than many. I encourage you to check out Open Disclosure, OaklandOpenDisclosure.org will tell you where candidate contributions are coming from. So with that, do we have any questions from Thought Exchange or off of the internet? While we wait to hear back from our fabulous staff and interns, Mr. Henry, are there things on the local election, either state or local ballot measures, that you think are important for voters to know about? There's so much hype around the presidential election that sometimes people forget to study their ballot measures. Are there any particular measures that the NAACP has already taken a position on?
We've taken a position on a few of them, but me personally, I think all of them are important. I think back on the work that I worked back in 2018 on Prop 10 and Prop 8. I think I would just think about that and understanding that ballot measure is important, and I hope that everybody is going to the polls, not just for ballot measures, but going back to local election. Whether that's district attorney, city council, school board, and again, that all goes back to voter advocate and making sure that people know what does a school board member do. And so that's what forums and town halls like this are for. So that way, people if they do fill out their ballot, they're not just filling it in or Joe or President Trump, whoever. But I think ballot measures of course local support.
And I want to add that I know the Queens of Cali are holding a voter registration drive at Lake Merritt. Now, stay socially distanced, people. You know my feelings about the lake. It needs a break. But they're doing it this weekend, all weekend long, 9 in the morning till 6 in the evening, right across from the Cleveland Cascade staircase. So on this side of the lake with lots of vendors. All day, September 18th, 19th, and 20th, a voter registration drive on the shores of Lake Merritt. All right, we've got some questions that have come in live from our viewers. Here is one for either Mr. Henry or Secretary Padilla's representative. How many mail-in ballots can you drop off for senior residential facilities? This is someone who is working with seniors. Who wants to take that question?
Hi, Mayor. This is Tamara Raspberry from the Secretary of State's office, Assistant Deputy to Secretary Padilla, and I'll take that. You can, as long as the ballots are signed and that the voter has agreed to let you drop that off, then they can collect those ballots and drop them off at a vote center. acvote.org, which is the Alameda County elections website, has a list right now of the drop boxes on by a map, and pretty soon they'll have the in-person vote center addresses available. And so you could see which is the nearest vote center next to that senior facility, and also you could drop it in the mail too.
Okay, but just to qualify, just to clarify, I think the question is suggesting that mail-in ballots could be dropped off at senior residential facilities. That is not the case.
That's not true. Correct. Yes.
Every single voter must request a ballot, and it will be mailed to them. They don't get dropped off, right?
That's correct. Every each envelope that is mailed out to each voter is unique to that voter, and so correct. You cannot grab a bunch of ballots and bring them back to a vote center. This is only if the votes are to the senior facility. This is only for ballots that have been completed. So I would encourage you to have your residents check their status, or you could assist them to check their voter registration status to make sure that that residential facility, if that is considered their residence, that their ballot's coming to them there.
Yeah, and if you have anyone who knows because of their health or their age cannot or should not go out to vote in person, do be sure they register for a mail-in ballot. And it is great. I know this started in the last election that anybody can deliver a completed signed ballot from an absentee voter and deliver that to a polling place. So that I think is really reassuring for particularly our seniors who might not even feel safe to go out to a mailbox. Anybody can collect those completed ballots and deliver them effectively. Here's a question. Where can Latinos get ballots in Spanish? What kind of equity are you ensuring for non-English speakers? I think that is also for you, Tamara.
That's a really good question. So ballots must be printed in at least 11 languages, and that could be requested. When you register to vote, you can request your ballot in another language. If you get it in English and you like a replacement ballot, you can contact the registrar's office at acvote.org and get your ballot in Spanish. And I'm not fluent in all the languages that are in Alameda County, but just think of the top 11 languages that are spoken in probably the same identical languages that are used in city services are also used in vote services. So you can request your ballot in Spanish. You can do that at the vote center if you show up in person, and you can also do that online.
Alameda County provides ballots in multiple languages, not just Spanish, Tagalog, Chinese, all sorts of languages. So please be sure, and I hopefully our interns can post information about all the languages that you can receive your ballot in. I know this got referred to before, but can we still register to vote? Yes, yes, and yes. And you can even register on election day. Tamara, do you want to remind people one more time how to get registered to vote all the way up to election day?
Absolutely. Register to vote.ca.gov. You could go online. You could register to vote. You could also do it at acvote.org. The registration deadline is October 19th. If you want to register to vote after that deadline, then I encourage you to register at the elections office, or when the vote center is open, you can register to vote and vote on the same day. So once those in-person vote centers are open on October 31st, the early vote centers will be open on October 24th. You'll be able to register to vote and then vote that same day.
Great. Oh, here's a question from Mr. Henry. I'm sorry?
I'm sorry, I said only until November 3rd.
Okay. Here's a question for Mr. Henry. When are we going to have voter registration booths set up here in East Oakland? I feel if the voting booth was closer to the low-income areas, you will get more votes. So what about voter registration in East Oakland?
That's a great question. You know, with COVID, go ahead. Oh, sorry, Mr. Henry.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna whoever asked that question, I was just gonna let them just reach out to the Oakland NAACP. They're definitely working with City Councilman Taylor for that, and I'm pretty sure. Actually, I know they will drop off boxes. And again, one good thing about California is that, again, if you are registered to vote, you automatically do get a mail-in ballot. So I would say we're blessed in California to have that access. You could go.
Well, thank you. I know it's hard because usually libraries are good sources, but they're closed right now. I know Councilmember Taylor just started a new farmers market in his district, and I bet there's a voter registration booth there. So that's a great suggestion. All right, here's a question for me. What inspired me to cast my first vote? Hashtag inspire new voters. I had a godmother named Mary Morris Lawrence, and she was the first woman to ever be hired by the Associated Press in New York City as a professional photographer. And she got me involved in the ERA movement. There was a movement to amend the Constitution to ensure that women had equal rights, that there was no discrimination based on gender. ERA did not succeed, but she got me so excited about the cause, and that's what got me to be inspired to vote in my very first election I could, and really got me interested in local government, and look what happened. So thank you, Mary Morris Lawrence, my godmother. Many elders have that ability to inspire young people to show that what they do matters. It absolutely does. Here's another question. About 2 years ago, I think means, most of our well-trained zone in Oakland were recently let go because we had reached our goals. Can you please reconcile? I think this is about the Census 2020. It's an urgency. So yes, we absolutely. I think they're talking about outreach workers. We cannot stop. Our goal is 100%, and so nothing short of 100% should have us stop. If you can direct message us or let us know more specifics about this issue, I am very committed to get this census done in the next 13 days. There was a question for Secretary Padilla, but I'm going to just ask Mr. Henry and Tamara, could you share what inspired you to first vote? Let's start with Mr. Henry.
What inspired me? Well, I'm from Berkeley. I've always been around politics. But what inspired me to time was definitely the conversation that I always had with my grandmother. So once I was 18, it was a midterm election that I was able to vote for the first time. And of course, I was, before that in high school, I volunteered on Congressman Marv Lee's campaign, and in my first presidential, I was able to work on Hillary's campaign. So I guess what inspired me was definitely my grandmother, and I, been running ever since, which is why I'm living here in DC currently, working on the Hill. So definitely, helping people and trying to activate more young people to vote,
Thank you. And Ms. Tamara, how about you?
Definitely my family was an influence. Political discussions were just dinner conversation, and I grew up, my parents took us to the polling place at the school where I grew up in Fairfield, California, and every election they sat down, went through their voter information guide, and then took us to their polling place. And it was very, very exciting for me. I was very excited to be able to register to vote for the first time. And even when I went to college in Atlanta, I continued to maintain my California residence. And my mother mailed me my ballot to Spelman College every year, and I filled it out and had to get it back in time. She said, "You're going to move back home, so California is your home, so you need to vote here," which I did. So I was just inspired because in my family, you have no choice but to vote. There was no excuse.
That's really interesting. It sounds like all of us were inspired by our elders. So that should be inspiration that we all still have the ability to inspire the next generation to get involved. Here's a question, and it's going to elicit an apology from me. It says, why would you encourage people to endorse your candidate only? That's not democratic. And I apologize if I suggested that I would participate in a Zoom only to tell people to vote for my candidate. The most important thing is to vote. And in many issues, there are good arguments on both sides. A lot of people are interested in what people working in government think, just because we're often closer to the issues or know a lot of the candidates personally or know their performance. But please, it is much more important that people participate. That is the most important thing. And I certainly apologize if I suggested anything different. But certainly elected officials are always asked to endorse. Candidates come and ask us for our endorsement. So we do have to take public positions on many of these things. And that's one of many data points that you can consider when you make your choice, what works for you. I know Ballotpedia has been a useful source for me. I find that interesting. It's often somewhat neutral. And there's lots of different places where you can get trusted information. Of course, the internet is full of a lot of inaccurate information. I think that is going to be voters' challenge in this election, to sift through what is true, what is not, what is accurate, what is not. The next two questions I think we answered already when Secretary Padilla was on the line. Does that conclude? I think that concludes our submitted questions. Tamara, can I ask you one last thing? What about residents who don't have reliable internet access, and particularly now that publicly accessible computers in our libraries are not available? How can people get registered who don't have that important internet access?
Yeah, that is so important. If they are able to get to the county office downtown, then they can register to vote at the county registrar's office. Several places, other places besides libraries, also have post offices, which are still open. Most post offices have voter registration forms on their site. Some service offices, county health services, county social services are all what we consider NVRA partners for their voter Voter Rights Act partners. And so they're required to have voter registration information on hand. So all of those are still open to the public. I believe City Hall has probably some voter registration cards. And also you can call 1-800-345-VOTE, which is our voter information hotline, give your address, and then a registration card will be mailed to you.
All right. Well, for those of you who do not know, the Registrar of Voters in Oakland is in the Alameda County Courthouse building, right on Fallon and 14th, right on the shores of Lake Merritt, kind of a famous historic building. That is where the Registrar of Voters is. And Mr. Henry, do you know of any other places where people can go in person to register to vote?
Not in person, to register to vote. Are you talking about in Oakland or just general?
Well, in Oakland, particularly because of COVID. I mean, libraries used to be a reliable place, but they're closed right now. City Hall is closed right now. You did hear me tell you that you can go to the shores of Lake Merritt this weekend. Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, there's a big voter registration drive in Lake Merritt. But Mr. Henry, maybe I can work with the NAACP to put some boxes with voter registration forms in some of our grocery stores and food stores in East Oakland in particular. Sound like a plan? All right. Well, with that, I'm going to offer our two guests just an opportunity to give some parting words, some thoughts from you, and an ending message for our viewers tonight that care about voting. We'll start with you, Mr. Henry.
My last thought is, again, thanks again for this opportunity. My last thought is, I hope that our words that we spoke to you guys has encouraged you guys vote in November. But also encourage at least 5 friends or family to get registered to vote or get them to the polls in November. Once now, so click up to this Fannie Gamer and see, what she went through. It's always encouraged me, to still be an activist at 25 years old and, still encourage people to get into public service. So overall, those are my parts. And I guess this is a personal word, not only but I'm really excited about November to have somebody that I know, Senator Kamala Harris, as the vice president, as a Black man in America. That is still, one thing surreal to me, but I'm still, taking that all in to see a Black woman become the potential the vice presidential nominee. So I'm excited about that. That's my personal parting note. So thank you so much, Mayor Staff.
Thank you, Mr. Henry, and thanks for everything that the NAACP has done, continues to do. You are just a pillar of our society in every town across this country. And Ms. Tamara, please, some parting thoughts on behalf of yourself and Secretary Padilla.
Thank you, Mayor. As the Secretary stated earlier, if you participated in any way in the actions this summer regarding Black Lives Matter, regarding equity in schools, you have your moment now for your voice to be heard, and that is by your vote. We have removed all physical barriers that we can imagine to make sure that you don't have to compromise your health and your safety in order to institute your constitutional right to vote. Your ballot will literally come to your home. Postage is paid. There'll be drop boxes all over the city and the county to make sure that it gets to the registrar's office and gets counted. Our office, the county has to receive your ballot. It has to be postmarked by November 3rd, but we're giving the post office 17 extra days to make sure that postmarked ballot makes it to the right home, makes it to the right registrar's office, and every vote will be counted. So you may not know who the winner is on election night, but we will have a very fair, a safe election for all of you. It's so important that this is your moment and your voice is your vote. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you to both of you for everything that you do for democracy, for public service. We thank you, everyone, for tuning in tonight, and we will be back in 2 weeks to talk to you, Oakland, hear your questions, your thoughts, Thank you. We are going to get through this moment together, and happy election season. Please make sure that you complete your census and that you're registered to vote. Have a good night.